Hey everyone, welcome to the Aimcise YouTube channel where we interview shooters and military and law enforcement professionals, hunters, Olympians, and archery champions from all around the world. And today we're happy to have Randy Turner with us, who's a former Canadian Special Forces operator. He now owns directactions.ca, which is a training company for law enforcement, military, and general public for combatives, firearms training, and all kinds of physical conditioning. Randy is also a former MMA champion for Canada, which is also very cool because we haven't had any fighters on our show. And actually, we haven't had any operators before. So Randy is the first one. Very grateful to have you. Welcome.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Greg. I'm looking forward to this, and thanks for making the time.
Yeah, thank you as well for taking the time, given how busy you were training the Winnipeg police the other week. Then you were with another police department just a couple of days ago before the weekend. But, we're here. And Randy and I met at Operator Expo in Ottawa a couple of months ago, which is open only to law enforcement, military, and corrections professionals. So it was very well welcomed at the show, I guess, with your offerings, and I saw you did some demos which are pretty cool. Anything that I missed in the intro that you want our listeners to know?
No, I think that's it in a nutshell. Yeah, I'm providing services for military law enforcement and general public, and those services range between combative self-defense, defensive tactics, as is known in the law enforcement world, and firearms training, including CQB. So that's kind of what I'm doing in a nutshell, and providing the opportunity for folks that are already in the industry or maybe interested in getting into that type of profession, just helping provide mentorship, guidance, and coaching. That's essentially what the business is, and it's been up and running for just over 2 years now, and the last 5 months has been. If the last 5 months is any indicator of what the future might hold for Direct Action, I'll be extremely happy, man. Because as you know, during COVID, nobody was moving. There wasn't a lot of training going on, and nobody knew who I was. So now that some municipal, federal, provincial organizations have reached out, the feedback has been very positive, and now I think people have an idea of what the brand represents, and it seems like the future could be pretty busy for this company, which is great.
Yeah, no, that sounds exciting, and I hope with Aimcise, which is mostly predominantly focused on the U.S. market, we be able to get the word out in the States about what you do, and with that, obviously I've given some of it away, but the first question I ask always is who are you and what makes you a person of influence, quote unquote, in the industry?
Sure. So my name is Randy Turner. I spent 21 years with the Canadian Armed Forces. 16 of those years were with the Canadian Special Forces. And while I was operating at the unit, in between deployments, I was also fighting professionally in mixed martial arts. I think what makes me unique in the sense of what I do for these professionals and what I'm trying to provide is the ability to put together everything from the psychological footprint on what it takes to perform optimally, but also the skills to support the mental side of things. And really the uniqueness is being able to blend that with kit and equipment, because there's one thing to stand statically on a range and punch holes in paper. There's one thing to teach defensive tactics on a safe matted space. It's a little bit different when you add a long gun. It's different when you add 50 pounds of equipment. It's different when you add kit and equipment, and also when you add an element of realism in terms of what stressors could the operator or the professional could face on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's the unique part in terms of what I bring to the table that might be a little bit different from some other organizations that are similar to myself.
Yeah, no, I love that, and especially with what Aimcise Supplements is striving to do, the mental side of things. And of course, I own another ecom brand in the, I guess EDC gear space, and definitely I saw your video that had like almost 600,000 views on your channel, which is the loadout video. So obviously gear is very important. Awesome. I mean, you've given a brief backstory about your service with the CAF. How did you get started in the military, and then when you transitioned out, how did you start with your business? So I was fascinated with the origin stories and things that
Yeah,
motivated people to do certain things.
yeah. I had a really great career with the Canadian Forces. I left on positive terms, and there was nothing negative. I felt maybe a little bit understimulated in some areas where I didn't feel completely fulfilled. Where my time in the military, certain motivations and certain phases of military career, things changed, to be completely honest. And I think that's probably a normal happening with evolution in the profession, in any profession, any industry. And when I started at a young age, right out of high school. I grew up in the East Coast and then joined the military at age 19. I spent just over 5 years with the 2nd Battalion PPCLI out West. So the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry is where I started. And that's where my ground roots really started to grow. Then I did selection for JTF2, and I became an assaulter with JTF2 in 2004, where I spent the majority of my career. Retired in 2019. And I think probably maybe 6 to 8 months prior to retirement, I knew I wanted to do something different. I knew I wanted to do something while I was still young enough to transition, and while I had the legs and the energy and the motivation to do it. And I kind of started to look at, what are the things that I really enjoy? What was it that the military was able to, enlighten me in what I'm really good at and what I like to do. So that's how I started kind of putting pen and paper together and thinking about what a business plan would look like and how I would run this once I did leave the military. And then I think probably within 8 months or so, prior to my last year of service, I had made the mental commitment and the shift to really start to focus on life after the military. So the transition it started while I was in the military, so I knew I was going to do something afterwards. And then when I did release from the Canadian Force, like I said, it was all positive, but I was torn because I'm still young enough where I felt like I still have 10 years at that point. I still have 10 years of fight left in me. I felt like there's still lots of good work to be done. So I was hesitant to leave, but also excited to leave. So I had mixed emotions. And when I did decide to leave, it was September 2019, I took maybe 10 days off to just kind of, take a break from everything. And then I really started to work and start to put things into play and figure out, who do I need to talk to? Who are the ones that I can trust and ask some questions on, what does it take to get a business off the ground? What are some trials and tribulations learned by others that I could either avoid or adopt? So I started to ask questions with guys that are, doing their own thing. And they, those guys really helped provide some mentorship and some guidance on things to avoid and some things to put into place. So that was early 2020, hit the ground running. I had a contract with my former unit, which was pretty awesome. And then I had a contract with the RCMP. So that was January, February, and then all of a sudden March hit. So March 2020, as everybody knows, that's when, COVID became a thing, and people were panicking and everything was getting shut down and locked down and nobody was moving. So there were months that went, unanswered emails or uncertainties where there were some policing organizations that were interested in doing the training, but they weren't in a position to pull the trigger on the training because of the COVID measures. So there was a lot of waiting, and it was a bit of a struggle, part of me was still looking in the rearview mirror a little bit, wondering, how the guys are doing at the unit, wondering what kind of jobs they're doing. And I was kind of looking in the rearview mirror, maybe a little bit too much, only because I wouldn't say only, primarily because nobody was training, nobody was moving. So I just felt like I was spinning wheels a little bit. That being said, there were a couple of organizations that, they really took a step forward in the understanding and the importance of training. And they found ways to work around the COVID nonsense and gave me a shot. And that's kind of what started. So the OPP hired me, the RCMP hired me, and Joint Task Force 2 hired me. So those contracts really helped kind of set the stage for, some of the offerings that Direct Action brings to the table.
No, that's awesome. It's quite a lot to unpack there, and because the topic of veteran transition is kind of near and dear to my heart. Again, it's kind of outside the scope of this show, but I did start a free group called Enlisted to Entrepreneur on Facebook last year, and kind of doing the same thing, getting a network of individuals who going into business after the military, and connecting those who have done this to those who are just thinking about it. And you've done a lot of the right things, like doing it early while you're still in, and making those connections and learning from people. And a lot that you took the direct action pretty much. Just a few months after getting out, you were already in the breach, getting contracts and doing the business. And also like the mental part of the resiliency, and also the patience. Like obviously things took time, and I know how frustrating it can be. And a lot of those mental things we're going to get into later, but it's probably direct what's the right word here? The direct result of what you have been going through in your tactical training, translating into your mindset when it comes to business. I just love how all of this like intertwines.
Oh yeah, I believe without a doubt the resiliency that I was able to execute after being in uniform. So when I hung up the uniform, there were certain things during my military career that 100%, without a question, helped me get through some of those dark times, during the COVID nonsense. And I do believe it. I attribute it to my military experience for sure.
All right, awesome. So next question is biggest life win so far, and then biggest life setback so far.
Biggest life win, I would say so far would have been, and it's tough to quantify, one operation or one tour, but biggest life win would have been, I would say, kind of part and parcel. It's two parts. One was coming off of a deployment in 2010. It was a really good deployment in Afghanistan, and we had a great group of guys that I had the opportunity to work with. We did some really good work, and then coming off of that tour on a bit of a high, as you can imagine, and pretty excited about what we just accomplished and some of the things that we could see the potential of in the future, and it was good. And then when I wasn't deployed, like I mentioned earlier, I was training and competing in mixed martial arts, and then I had a pretty good run with a few wins back to back right after that. So there was a phase of my life that was probably a good year and a half, 2 years, where it just felt like all the hard work that was being, channeled and put into both professions, both military and mixed martial arts, it was really starting to come to fruition. And I'll be completely honest with you, my goal was to fight in the UFC. I wanted to be the first Canadian Armed Forces soldier to fight in the UFC, so I was really motivated for that. At the same time, I had the great fortune to work with some of the best soldiers in the Canadian Armed Forces and some of the best soldiers in the world. So there really was a phase of my life that was an ultimate high, and I would say a life win. I learned a lot about myself. I matured a lot as a professional soldier. I matured a lot as a fighter, and things were going really well. For the MMA world, things didn't work out in my favor. I had a couple of losses, a couple of setbacks, and the UFC didn't give us that opportunity, which is it's fine. That's the way it goes. But I have no regrets. I loved every minute of it. I would say that would have been the life high. A life setback. I don't really dwell on it too much, but there were some decisions that I made with military and professional MMA that they had a cascading knock-on effect with each other. So for an example, there were probably 50% of my chain of command when I was in uniform who were in support of me fighting professionally. And then there was 50% who were absolutely against it. And so much so that I believe when I made a decision what I asked for when I was in uniform was to take a position out of an operational role so I could focus on MMA for a couple of years. And they granted that. And I think what they saw was the value that I was able to bring to the unit. So they didn't want to see me leave the unit. So what they did is they provided a position for me where I could still be gainfully employed within the unit. But I knew that that was shooting my career in the foot. Like I literally, I could tell after those 2 years while I was in uniform, focusing on MMA and not so much focusing on the deployments that the unit wasn't heavily involved with. It was a tough decision because yes, I wanted to be, deployed and I wanted to be active with the military, but I also want to see if I can make it to the UFC. So I was a little bit older when I started my professional MMA career. So being a 30, 32, 33-year-old, I was fighting against guys that were 24, 25. So I knew if I was going to make it to the UFC, I really had to dedicate some serious time to training. So that's why I asked for a bit of a sabbatical from uniform. That being said, when I did get back into the mix, it never really felt the same. I felt like I was then viewed with my peers in the military. I felt like I was viewed as the MMA guy and no longer the soldier. And maybe that's a little bit internalization of myself. Maybe that wasn't the reality, but I certainly felt that way from certain influential positions of, the chain of command. And I did feel like after that, my career kind of flatlined a little bit. So I don't dwell on it too much. We all have to accept the decisions that we make, and I have no regrets. I tried to do everything I could to be operationally employable, but also to see how far I could take my MMA career. And things didn't work out in one way or the other, but everything happens for a reason. And I truly believe because of those experiences, it's what makes the direct action brand such a piece of value. And this is, feedback that I'm getting from these organizations that I've had the great pleasure to provide training for. They appreciate the operational context. They appreciate the MMA experience. So when I speak to things like resiliency and mental preparation for an operation or mental preparation for an MMA event, it can translate, and they appreciate the crossover with what I'm providing for them. So at the end of the day, is it a life setback? Maybe a little bit, but really, like I said earlier, Greg, I don't have any regrets, and I think the person that you see before you today wouldn't be the character that I am without those experiences.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that story. And yeah, definitely, I don't think it is a setback. It's more like a forming experience, in my opinion. And it's a dichotomy, and I see this a lot in the Army Reserve world, which I've been a part of for 22 plus years. And it's also like you're in and out of uniform, and you're trying to pursue a career and possibly a passion, and then you also have the commitment to serve. And yeah, like I have also, when I was my career was taken off, I had to pretty much put the military service a little bit on the back burner, and that's kind of stifled my career progression as well for like probably a decade. But in that time, I was able to scale the business and learn some lessons in the business world that made also me, I guess, who I am today. But anyways, it's not about me. Let's move on. The last question, about your persona, I guess, is who was your life biggest influence, and then why?
Biggest influence, I would say, it's probably my dad.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was a steel worker for 50 years. He retired at age 73. As an iron worker, for those who are maybe not aware, it's not an easy job. It's a dirty grind. And he was a hardworking man, and he really set the example without knowing it. He didn't really preach. He just did it. And what I realized later in life was everything that he did was about action. And hence the reason I put a lot of thought into naming the company Direct Action. It's about taking action. We can talk and talk and talk. We can read books. We can do, multiple educational feats to acquire one degree after another. But if we don't do anything with that information, it really doesn't matter. And one thing that I was really influenced heavily with both my mom and dad, but predominantly with my dad, was he didn't make a lot of money. He raised 3 boys. He made sure that we stayed out of shit. He put us in sports as best as he could. I'm sure his credit cards were always maxed out, and he was just trying to make ends meet. And he kept that going until he was literally 73 years old is when he retired. So he's an inspiration. He is the epitome of hard work. And I truly believe, and people that know me well, they'll hear me preach about it a lot. There is no substitution for hard work. There are certain things that in terms of preparation, when we're prepared, when we do things, sometimes, we might get lucky. Opportunities will be presented to us or fall in our lap. But I do believe sometimes those opportunities are created just through hard work and discipline. So I believe my dad is the one that really, he helped harness that at a young age.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I do see that a lot. And a lot of people where their mom and dad were like the biggest influence over the years. Obviously, it's been lots of other help along the way, but those are the first, first people you see in your life, and they really set the foundation for years to come. And, I like what you said about action and hard work versus just, accumulating knowledge. Just like Tony Robbins says, most people's problem is not that they don't know what to do, is that they don't do what they know.
Right. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
All right. So thank you for sharing some of your life lessons and your story. But let's switch gears and tell our viewers and listeners more about the nitty-gritty of things, like the actual act of shooting bullets and getting on target, because that's what everybody wants, is to learn how an elite operator who's been doing it for a long time thinks and trains. And the first question is, someone comes up to you who's an aspiring shooter, has like very little to no experience, doesn't know where to start. What is your first recommendation?
Sure. I would probably ask them, what is their motivation? What is their short-term and long-term goals? So if somebody is interested in firearms training, I'll use pistol for an example. So if somebody wants to learn how to use a pistol, they've never shot a pistol before, but they're interested, I would pose the question, what are your interests? Do you want to be a sports shooter? Do you want to be a hobbyist? Or are you thinking about maybe something in the profession where a sidearm would be your either primary or secondary firearm of choice? And based on those answers would kind of direct the way that I would help train and teach somebody of those interests. Now, I do believe there are elements of sports shooting that would complement a tactical shooter. There are elements of a tactical shooter that would complement a sports shooter. And at the end of the day, applying a specific set of skills to get a desired effect takes practice. There's dedication, there's time and repetition that is required. I would say to that one individual, first, what kind of shooter do you want to be? And then I would say, how much time and how much money are you willing to invest? Because bullets are not cheap, firearms are not cheap, and there are associations with proficiency in that type of field that you're gonna have to commit something. You have to sacrifice something in order to commit to something. So I guess I would start with that conversation.
No, that's awesome, and I like how you bring up the motivation as the very first thing, because it's kind of like the book by Simon Sinek, Start with Why. Really, it applies to everything. Like you gotta start with the why first, and then a lot of things fall into place after that, as opposed to just like going straight into trying to acquire the skills. And a little segue, obviously the cost of ammunition is a burning problem for the last couple of years. What's your stance on dry fire and those laser simulator training?
Yeah, I agree with both of them. I have some of the laser target training aids that I utilize, and dry fire. is underutilized, I believe, and undervalued. I would say, 15, 20-minute sessions once or twice a week with dry fire drills, with reload drills, trigger manipulation, grip, alignment. Those are things that we can practice in our basement. Those are things that we don't need a lot of space, time, and it doesn't cost any money. I would say if somebody is serious about shooting and they implement a little bit of dry fire or utilizing one of those tools that are out there as a training aid, there are some great ones out there, you'll definitely improve your overall shooting, your ability to be comfortable with, how to operate from a holster, drawing and reloading, trigger manipulation. All of that stuff can be done through dry fire, which doesn't cost a lot of money. So yes, I'm a huge fan and component, and I would advocate for anyone who's serious about their shooting, implement a little bit of dry firing every week if you can.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, our team captain for CAFSAC back in the day was really big on dry firing too, partially because I'm always rationed, as you know. Okay, cool. So next question is, a lot of shooters, whether beginners or even seasoned, one of the questions that comes up is confidence. Is there anything specific you do to increase confidence in the shooter? Any drills or practices?
Yeah, that's a big one. So, there's a lot of studies that support confidence being the number one contributing factor to optimal performance. And oftentimes I love having this conversation because how do we get confidence? You don't just wake up one day and say, today I'm going to be more confident than I was yesterday. It doesn't work that way. Too bad it didn't. But I do believe it can start with visualization. It can start with, if we focus on what it is that we want to achieve, there's a higher probable chance that you're going to achieve that thing versus focusing on what you don't want to do. That negative connotation can really slow your learning down and can really hinder your ability to build confidence. So whenever we practice anything, if it's doing some drills on the mat or sparring, or if it's dry fire, or if you're actually on the range doing some live fire practice to help build the confidence, there's a principle that I share with folks when it comes to training, and it's a 70-30 principle. If we only have 2 hours to train, it's probably a good idea that we focus 70% of our time on the things that we know we're not quite good at yet, and then still finish the last 30% of our training time on doing the things that we're really good at and the things that we really enjoy to do, because that's going to help with your motivation to continue to train, and B, it is going to help bridge the gap between lack of confidence or growing confidence. So that 70-30 principle is what I try to apply no matter what training iteration I'm going through. If it's in the gym, if it's conditioning related or firearms specifically, I really try to focus on the 70-30 principle.
Yeah, that's nice. I've seen that before, where you try to end on a high note, which means you don't want to finish your session with something that you quote unquote failed at, right? So because that leaves like a bad mark and you dwell on it. Whereas I actually love that 70-30 thing. And one thing for confidence, I don't know if you read the book Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, but he mentioned something called the cookie jar, where he basically, when sometimes he starts to doubt himself, he would go back in his memory and think about past accomplishments. Do you find that effective in terms of confidence building?
Yeah, I had the great opportunity to work with some really quality sports psychologists in the past, and there's what was been taught to me and what was shared with me is what's referred to as a highlight reel. So I think similar to what you're explaining there with David Goggins, is the highlight reel is past experiences that there was a series of events that really helped with an optimal performance. And when you look back at it, sometimes it's a circumstance of being in flow state, but flow state, applying certain techniques in a certain amount of time with the right amount of focus, with the right amount of intensity, that can be challenging. We'll sometimes force something to happen that is just not ready to happen yet. So instead, what I try to do is just have 3 or 4 high points of past experiences from accumulated highlight reel. And when I feel myself having those doubts, then I'll tap into the highlight reel and kind of almost like self-coach myself, so I'll look back at it and think, all right, well, what was it that I applied that allowed that experience to be, a high performing or optimal performance? And then whatever those details are, I will really hang on to the facts, not perception of what I think happened, but actually what did happen. And it brings me back to a state of, kind of relaxed confidence, but B, it reinforces the fact that it happened in the future, or sorry, in the past, which means it can happen again in the future if I allow it to happen. And if I, put the parameters in place of the controllables that I can control, well, then I can make it happen. An example that I can give to you is, I remember, like, I compete a little bit in IPSC, but I haven't competed a lot just because of the tempo, etc. In a couple of competitions, there's stages that I shot really well, and there were stages that I shot absolutely terrible. And I know what I'm capable of, but what would happen is sometimes I would question, like, I would have a plan before shooting that stage. I'd have a plan. And then the moment I saw somebody before me shoot really well, then I would start to question my plan rather than just sticking to my plan. And I noticed every time that I would question my plan, then my performance was suboptimal, not exactly what I would like. But when I decided to stick with my plan and then revert to past experiences, why things went well, I would put those two things together, and then I would have a more optimal performance. So highlight reels in conjunction with stick with your plan. And when you do apply a plan, be willing and prepared to pivot slightly. So if things are not going according to plan in the heat of the moment, rather than trying to force something that we really want to happen, be able to take a deep breath, maybe more of a panoramic view, and say, okay, this is not working out so well. What can I do? What small change can I make to pivot to apply a more optimal performance?
Yeah, no, that's really great advice. And yeah, it just applies on the field or in business, or a lot of business had to pivot, including your own, and during COVID. I like the plan the work the plan, and then be no plan survives first contact, as we all know. Being able to think on the fly, but in the military, obviously we're big on contingency planning, and COA 1, COA 2, COA 3. Any word on the contingency plan, since we're talking about plans?
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And that I can say that that's definitely a skill and an ability that was developed through military. And it's always good to have COAs, so course of action, 1, 2, or 3. One thing I caution folks on is when they're putting together their course of action, it's a plan essentially. Sometimes we can put focus on what's sometimes referred to as a throwaway COA. I wouldn't put any effort into that. If we're already considering throwing that course of action out the window, then don't put any energy into it. It's a waste of resources. So you may as well focus on, if you've got 2 solid plans, I would much rather that than have 2 really good plans and then a third plan that we know is just, we're not going to implement that. So don't even bother wasting time, is what I would say. So yes, have contingencies, but put your effort and your resources with the fact that there's got to be a tangible reality to actually executing that plan. Otherwise, it's a waste of time.
No, I think a throwaway COA is really a courseism. Like, it doesn't really happen in real life. I think it's more like when you must have 3 and you only have 2, then people just make shit up. But anyways, that's really cool. Kind of piggybacking on the topic of building confidence, motivation. How do you motivate yourself or your students?
I think for myself, I motivate through action. So I motivate what motivates me is, not just talking about it, but doing it. And I put a little bit of pressure on myself where, I help people with nutrition, I help people with conditioning, I help people with shooting, I help people with fighting. Well, if I'm not doing those things, then I'm a hypocrite. So what motivates me is to keep my skills sharp in all of those areas. I need to keep myself sharp, but I also know that we only have so much time to train. So one good thing about running a business is I can focus on the things that I know are most important right now. So there's no need to focus on anything that's really not that high of priority right now. I can put that on the shelf and maybe address that later on. So that's what motivates me. That's what keeps me spry when I get out of bed in the morning. I can't wait to get after it and do some form of polishing skill craft and trade craft. To help motivate others, what I like to do is I like to challenge my clients. I like to challenge them, see what they're really good at, see what areas maybe identified as limitations, and then really, really harness their ability to connect and bridge the gap between what they're really good at and what is a identified limitation, either self-identified or something that I can see, just the way they move or their ability to apply a certain skill, whether it's a shooting drill or whatever it might be. And what motivates me to motivate them is watching them grow and watching them being able to achieve that thing that, maybe 2 hours ago they were struggling with, but now they got it. And not only do they got it, they're crushing it because I was able to push them and see that at the edge of discomfort is where we really grow. But if we do not flirt at that edge of discomfort, then we're going to flatline, and maybe not flatline, but we're going to plateau. So what I like to do is be able to see what they're really good at and what, areas of limitations they may have, and then keep pushing those limitations. So eventually that bridge will become, that gap will become more narrow. And then you really see their confidence grow and their performance improve. And that gives me a kick. So maybe that's a little bit of selfishness, I guess, is I enjoy watching others grow and improve.
Yeah, no, it's like, I don't know who said it, Cirque du Soleil or somebody else. We rise by lifting others, and I fully subscribe to that statement. And I remember when I was an instructor and I saw my graduating class in full uniform on parade, I had a tear in my eye, and I was a small part of that.
Yeah.
So motivation, Jocko says, is fickle. Actually, it will run out eventually. It's not an endless resource. And what Jocko believes is superior strategy is just having the discipline. So what do you do to improve discipline? Any daily routines you follow or anything to help with that?
Yeah, I mean, I would slightly disagree that motivation is fickle. I believe confidence will be bruised from time to time when we have a suboptimal performance. Of course, our confidence is going to be shaken a little bit, but maybe to support the notion or the fact that discipline is the ability to bounce back, resiliency is the ability to bounce back after a suboptimal performance. And I think being able to do that really quickly, that takes practice, that takes time, but it's also an actionable step where there's tangible resources, or there is a series of events that we can execute to bounce back from that. If we just stop and become stagnant after a suboptimal performance, well, there's no way that we can improve unless we start to try something different, or start the same process again with a different approach. So I guess the way I would look at that is, discipline, yes, is extremely important. Motivation is going to come from different areas at different stages of our life. What motivates me today might be very different than what motivates me 2 weeks from now. For tapping into or blending motivation and discipline, I think discipline is a learned behavior, and we will become the thing that we want to become through manageable bite-sized action steps every single day. An example that I would give you is I have a few clients that are struggling with their weight and they're struggling with their nutritional choices. And what I share with them is, instead of putting so much pressure on yourself in terms of you want to lose X amount of weight by X amount of time, instead look at it like a behavioral lifestyle change. So, this week, your goal might be, just eat one handful less of potato chips. I'm just using that as an example. And if you get through that week, Monday to Friday, and you notice, and you look in the cupboard of your kitchen and you notice, what, I never touched that bag of chips all week. To me, that is a small victory that needs to be celebrated. And when I say celebrated, an internal fist bump that says, what, because of my action step and my behavioral change, I'm a step closer to my tangible goal. And we can take it in little steps like that. But I do believe discipline, motivation, it is a learned behavior. I don't think I don't necessarily think that we can listen to a really motivating podcast or audio show or whatever it might be, and then be fired up. Yeah, I think it does work, but I don't know if it's sustainable without continual action steps that's going to become a learned behavior.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that answers that question or not, but
Yeah, no, in my mind, I think that kind of paraphrases what Jocko meant is like, yeah, you can go listen to rah motivational speaker and get fired up for a few days, and then it will fizzle away. But the small actions that you stack up little by little every day, those are the things that are going to keep you moving forward. Awesome. And obviously from discipline, going to staying organized, and that has two parts: staying organized in terms of time management and mental management, and also just having in the shooting environment good grip on your kit and your gear and all that. Any
yeah.
tips or practices that you can recommend?
Yeah, so organization, time management, those are definitely factors that we want to think about. Like if we're going to the range, to practice a specific set of skills, have a plan, have a plan before you even get there. So it all starts in your house or in your staging area, wherever that might be. If you're a profession in the military or law enforcement, wherever your vault and your gun lockup is, it starts before you even go to pick up your gun. It starts with your plan leading into your practice. So organize your thoughts, organize your training aims, so you already know you've already kind of primed your learning ability. You already primed your cognitive acceptance to what it is that you want to apply physically. So I would say to keep things organized and respect time management, rather than just kind of rolling through the motions where grab my guns, grab my ammo, go to the range, put up a couple of targets and then shrug my shoulders and say, all right, I'll see where I'm going here. I would say really be deliberate and purposeful with the practice. So if for an example, you really want to work on transitioning from long gun to pistol, already have that preset, what that drill is going to look like, and what training aims are you hoping to achieve in the 2-hour window or the hour-and-a-half window that you might have for that training block. That's going to not only speed things up in terms of your ability to get there, but it's also going to amplify the efficiency of the time. So we're not wasting any time. We're not just going through the motions. We're actually deliberate about our practice. One thing that I can definitely get better at, and might be worthwhile mentioning because others can learn from it, is I really struggle with the ability to say no. So when somebody asks me for something, I want to provide for them and I want to help them out. What happens though is sometimes if this is a Monday, I get an email or a phone call. Yep, I can help you out. I'll try to squeeze you in the schedule. I can help you out. I can help you out. By Friday or by Saturday, what I realized is I didn't give myself any time. There was no time for me to practice my skills. There was no time for me to improve my limitations. And that can be problematic because sometimes that week will turn into 2 weeks, might turn into 3 weeks. And what I realize is I continue to give and give and give, but then, the bucket only has so much water, right?
Mhm.
My bucket becomes empty and I have nothing left to give. And then I suffer from motivation to actually want to get on the range or actually want to get to the gym or actually want to do something that's beneficial for me. So one thing that it's really come to light over the last 5 or 6 months is I need to build in a day or even a half a day that's dedicated just for my training. And that's for me to polish up my skills and to work on certain things that I have identified as limitations. Because if we just continue to give and give and give and, answer emails and never turn the phone off, or, the amount of time that we have is so finite. And before you know it, the days lead into weeks, the weeks lead into months. And then we end up operating at a tempo that is not optimal.
Yeah, so I agree. Having a plan and incorporate a few me days into the busy schedule is probably going to be helpful for other listeners here, who some of them do this full time, some of them do this in their spare time, and carving out time to train and to master the craft is going to be important. And saying no, like sometimes you don't have the luxury to, especially when you're starting out in your business or whatever, or you just have a big heart. But learning from like super successful people, that's probably like the number one skill that they say they acquired as saying no, and if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. Like a lot of people
Yeah.
adopt that philosophy. So good advice there. Okay. What role do focus and calmness play in practicing your craft specifically?
Big time. Various levels of focus, in some cases, depending on what the scenario is, maybe a CQB context might be a good example where, we're focused on doing a CQB run, whether it's training or operation. We're focused on where we are in the stack. If we're working in a 5 or 6 man brick, where are we in that stack? We need to be focused on what's in front of us, but also what's behind us. And then as things unfold in a chaotic situation, that focus will translate, and it'll ebb and flow from kind of wide panoramic view to very pinpoint accurate view in terms of what it is that we're trying to focus on. So I think having the ability to really understand how to breathe and use the diaphragm to control our emotions and to really be, I would say, head up and out, if you will. So a more of a panoramic view gives us the ability to, when things change and when things get a little bit stressful, we can then, hone our focus in with the right amount of attention on the right thing at the right time, which is it's a bit of a timing dance, if you will. But having the ability to take a big deep breath, calm our central nervous system down a little bit, is going to give us the ability to then make more acute, accurate decisions when things are a little bit chaotic or a little bit stressful. So whether it's a CQB environment where firearms are definitely implemented, or it's a specific firearms range practice, having the ability to be relaxed when we need to be firm when we need to be, and open up our visual arcs when we need to be is that's a skill on its own. There are drills that we'll sometimes implement on the range to do exactly that. So sometimes we're firm and tense, sometimes we'll relax and posture changes, and the ability to dial it up or dial it back on demand is really the difference between, in my opinion, a professional and somebody that's just not quite there yet.
Yeah, no, thank you for explaining how big focus, how big of a role it plays in what you do and what you teach. Okay, so next question. You obviously are a planning man. You mentioned planning several times. So in the planning process, how do you set your goals, and then how do you measure your progress against them?
Right. So every Sunday, I will write down 3 goals, and so I carry a daily planner with me everywhere I go. I prefer to use pen and paper over an electronic device. So the electronic device is important for my schedule and my calendar, but my goals will go on paper. And the reason that I find this more effective is what I'll simply do is I'll put little boxes. So 3 boxes, 3 things that I want to achieve for the week. And then as they get kind of knocked off, and once those goals are achieved, I'll just check it off. And what works well for me is I find I'll sit down, take 15, 20 minutes just to kind of like clear my head, put some pen to paper. What is it that I want to achieve for this next week? And then what happens is when you think about it and then you actually write it, it has more meaning, it has more weight. So it's almost like the notebook is keeping me accountable. So if I wrote it down, it's because I thought about it. If I thought about it, it's because I care about it. If I care about it, it means I'm going to execute on it. So I try to keep my goals at no more than 3. I find sometimes the goals can be, stacked up, and then we put a lot of pressure on ourselves if we don't achieve those goals by the end of the week. So I keep it to 2 or 3. As those things are getting kind of, knocked out of the park, then I just check them off and then carry it on. That's what works well for me.
Yeah, no, that's very elegant and simple, and just having a simple paper list and keeping just the 3 top priority goals. Obviously, there's got to be small things in between there, but yeah, if you accomplish those 3, you won the week, and that creates confidence. Awesome.
Right.
All right, no, that's a nice and simple system, obviously. All right. You did mention you are a big fan of visualization, and I know from other people that it's huge for, all high level athletes and tier one operators and anybody who's successful, really. Any other any more like words on visualization that you can spend 30 seconds on, or any
Sure.
other like things that help, like self-talk or positive mantras that you do?
Yeah. The visualization, imagery, and positive self-talk, those two practices I try to implement on a pretty regular basis. And when it comes to visualization, I really try to focus on what it is that I'm trying to achieve. So what is the desired outcome? I'll focus on that, and then I work my way backwards. In other words, I can see, the goal that I want to achieve, but it's the process that's going to get us to that goal. So the way I look at it is, okay, this is where I see myself. So I'll use MMA for an example. I'm about to go into a fight. I already see my hand raised at the end. So I know I'm going to win. But then I really focus on the process to get there. So all the steps along the way, what is it that needs to be implemented to ensure that I get that victory? Now, there are no guarantees, as we know, in life and in sport for sure. There are no guarantees. So rather than focusing on all of the potential problems, I'll look at it from the perspective, okay, I see my hand raised. Now I'm going to go backwards. And each step along the process, of course, there's going to be obstacles, there's going to be hiccups, there's going to be setbacks. But what's important is visually, seeing myself get through those hiccups and get through those obstacles. And I'll try to implement as many senses as I possibly can. What will it feel like? What will it smell like? What will it look like? What are the things that I might hear? The more senses that I can implement when I'm practicing visualization, I find the more real it becomes, and it feels like a repetition of success. So those, when it comes to visualization and imagery, those are the things that I try to practice. Now, I'll be completely honest with you. Sometimes I don't do that very well, and sometimes I do it really, really well. And the difference between when it goes really well and when it doesn't is I can take the time to settle my mind down and then action the visualization. If I'm trying to force the visualization while I've got 10 other things on the go, it doesn't work very well.
That goes back to the question of focus, I guess.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's really powerful, that technique. And people may approach it with some skepticism, but you are a living proof that it does work when you execute it properly. Awesome.
Yes.
We're getting towards the end of the question list here, but obviously consistency is big in any shooting sport, archery, shooting, or I guess tactical scenarios. Any advice for building consistency?
Yeah, we'll use shooting as an example. So if you're going to focus on pistol shooting or shotgun shooting or whatever it is, whatever the platform is, I don't think it really matters. But the consistency is, time and money play factors for sure. It's not cheap. So we need to be honest with how can we be consistent with the resources that we have readily accessible. And if we put too much pressure on ourselves because we want a certain output, well, wants are different than needs. If we can legitimately say, I need to put in 15 minutes of dry fire a week in order to achieve a certain output, well, that's a tangible goal that you can control. But if you want to go to the range every single week for 2 hours, the reality is, A, you may not have the finances for it. B, you may not have the time for it. So we would be putting pressure on ourselves that is unsustainable, and it's not going to come to fruition. Hence, we'll get frustrated, and maybe we may not stay consistent. But if we control what we can control, so dry fire is a great example. I know that I'm going to improve my firearms handling and my firearms shooting ability if I implement 15 minutes of dry fire practice every week. There is no excuse or no reason why we cannot carve 15 minutes of dry fire practice in, no matter how busy we are. If anybody says I've been too busy, they have not prioritized accurately. So I would say consistency, we have to be honest with resources, time, finances for sure. But essentially what I'm getting at is the things that we can control, that's what we need to be consistent with. The things that are outside of the realm of what we can control, we're playing catch up. Whatever happens, whatever life throws at us, we're just reacting.
Oh yeah, no, that's awesome. It ties in beautifully into some of the other things we spoke today about, prioritization and time management and goal setting and planning. So thank you for that. Favorite quote you live by, or you would put on the billboard somewhere?
Absolutely. So I have a quote on a tattoo on my forearm, and it's by Mahatma Gandhi, and it says, "Joy lies in the fight and the suffering involved, not in the victory itself." And I absolutely love that, and I live it. Joy lies in the fight and the suffering involved. In other words, we must, I believe, to the core of my being, we must embrace the process. If we become overly fixated on the end state goal, we are missing so many great opportunities to develop our character, develop our human nature. And that quote, when I read it, it resonated with me, part and parcel, because I'm a fighter through and through. I've been a combat soldier. I absolutely love my time deployed in a combat role, but I've also fought professionally in the cage. So for me, I embrace fighting. I embrace everything that has to do with the preparation to be a good fighter, the commitment to sustain certain skills, and it's the suffering, it's the struggle day in and day out that I've learned to embrace. I just had a great weekend with a few different clients, and training with these clients. Some of them, I'm on the receiving end. So sometimes I'm the nail, and sometimes I'm the hammer. And those moments where you're the nail, it's like, hey, that comes with the process, man. That's all part of the territory. So joy lies in the fight and the suffering involved, not in the victory itself.
No, that's a great quote, and kind of like Ryan Holiday's book, "The Obstacle is the Way," Stoicism. It's all about enjoying the journey, not the
Yes.
destination. All right, awesome. Final question. If somebody forgets everything you just said and you want them to have one takeaway, the silver bullet or golden arrow, like we call it, what would it be?
I would say do more, talk less.
All right, there you go. Short and sweet. Okay, thank you. So thanks, Randy. We're right on the top of the hour here. You've been really generous with your time, and I'm really glad you were able to come on the show. Thank you for all the inputs and advice, and hopefully our audience will take them away and apply them and get better. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate your time, Greg. And anytime, consider the lines are open now. So if you have any questions about anything, you want to do a follow-up, please reach out anytime.
All right. Cheers.
All right. Thanks a lot, Greg.